Okay, good morning, everybody. I think we're going to get started. So welcome to this session on remote testing research studies here at CASAS. It's presented by myself. My name is Daniel Esco. I'm the project manager and an assessment specialist for the item and test development team here at CASAS. I'm joined by Linda Taylor, the VP of assessment development also at CASAS, and Jared Jacobson, a senior research analyst at CASAS. A couple things before we get started. Just please remember to keep yourself muted unless you have something to share. If you have some background noise, I might mute you myself, but please do that before we get started. Also, this session is going to be recorded, so please be aware of that, and it will be posted online after the session. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Linda.
Hello, everyone. Very glad you could join us today. We have a lot of interesting and exciting things to share with you. So we will have a poll in just a second, but let me just go over the topics. Hopefully by now, at this point in the Summer Institute, you are aware of remote testing and have a basic understanding of what it's about, but I am going to do some general introduction to remote testing as CASAS has implemented it. Then Jared will be going over our preliminary findings in remote testing research, both for remote testing and for our mobile phone pilot testing. We will be taking questions from you during that and after it. And so if you have questions, please, while any of us are speaking, if you could enter them in the chat box, and then we will pause for some time to specifically ask questions, at which point, if you want to open your mic, you can. And then finally, we're going to be spending some time asking you to answer some survey questions. And also, we're going to have an open discussion about your responses and thoughts about some of the things that we're looking into related to remote testing. So that's an overview of what we're about today. Now, Daniel is going to put a link in the chat box, and we'd like you to please answer this initial poll about your experience with remote testing. I'm not sure how long it'll take. If people are finished, if a few of you could put finished in the chat box when you're done or need more time. All right, I'm getting a lot of dones here. All right. Okay. Then I think we'll carry on. And if you're just needing another few seconds, go ahead and take them and submit when you're done. So let me begin with this overview. So we all can relate, I think, to the challenges about remote testing. Many of you have experienced uncertainty about how it might impact your program. What are these processes really like? And how would it play out in our program? The equity concerns have come to light in a very big way, both for proctors and students. The access to technology, to devices and bandwidth is a huge spotlight has been shown on these inequities. And also we have the challenge of the student's environment in their home may not be private or quiet. Although we have heard from many students that they like it because it is comfortable and convenient. Another big challenge with remote testing is that it does place huge demands on a program's staffing. You cannot test 25 students at a time as you could before, and as you can with in-person testing. And even with in-person testing, you're limited with social distancing. But in any case, with remote testing, this is a challenge because it takes a whole lot more time to get it done. Some of the benefits. One is a huge benefit that it really adds a lot of flexibility to what you're able to do in testing. Before, when we were doing distance learning, even before the pandemic, we were not able to allow you to test those distance learners. And if they couldn't ever come into the program, you wouldn't be able to capture their gains. But now you certainly can in spades. And that's something that, you know, is a real benefit now. And we hope that you'll continue to use remote testing, not just for your distance learners, but even, let's say, for students that missed post-testing or for any other reason cannot come in person. Childcare, transportation, a number of things, that you now have this additional tool in your toolkit. We have provided 4 different ways that you can deliver remote testing with CASAS tests. And for each of them, there's a detailed step-by-step guidelines document that lays out all of the requirements and features for each one. And in summary, 2 of them you can only do one-on-one, the remote control, where the proctor gives remote control to the student, but because that the test security is more limited there, it's essential for the proctor to have eyes on the student all the time, so just one-on-one. And oral responses is also only one-on-one because the student is actually speaking out their answers to each question. Number 1, I think it's B. Number 2, I think it's C, etc. And the others, we allow up to 5 at a time currently. And those can be done on either a Windows PC or on Chromebooks or iPads if they are in their special modes for test security. The Chromebook is a kiosk mode and the iPads is secure access. So these are the ways that you can do more, up to 5 students at a time if your proctors are comfortable with that. So we do have this chart that summarizes the different approaches, whether you can take it with one, you can give it to 1 or more test takers, what devices are allowable for both the proctors and the test takers, and which platforms can be used. So I'm not going to go over this in detail. This is all on the website on our remote testing page. So, and hopefully you've already been introduced to remote testing. Actually, the last session of the Summer Institute today, I will be giving a remote testing overview. So if you need more details, you do have 1 more chance to get that this week. We have lots of resources, as I mentioned, on this remote testing page, and including video demos, etc. And all the agreements that you need to sign, they're all there. And we have made these 2 videos. One on the right is a demo of the remote control approach, and the one on the left is about registering test stations. So those should be helpful to you to get started. In terms of our plans for remote testing, we have allowed some agencies to pilot testing more than 5 students, and These are agencies that where there are proctors who are extremely comfortable. They've been doing the remote testing for some time, and they have been able to test up to 12 students. They felt that it went well. So we will soon be coming out with some guidelines to give you the option to do that, but only, and this is a really big only, if the proctor is comfortable. Secondly, and we're going to go into a lot more about this today, is that we've been looking at the option of testing on mobile phones. And that's the research we're going to be presenting on as part of it anyway. And also, very exciting, we are in the midst of developing the ability for e-tests to have video conferencing embedded within it, so that when you do remote testing, you would not have to go to Zoom or some other platform. The video would show right in the e-test app. And also we are developing a mobile app that would go along with this pilot and allowing testing on phones. So that would also have the integrated video. Finally, we know that some test publishers are allowing third-party proctoring services to give their tests. And we have had some interest in this, but honestly, very little. And we have explored it, but at this point in time, we have not decided to go with this option. But if we were to hear that there was a groundswell of interest in the field for this, then we might consider doing it. So if you are interested in this, please let us know. And any other question or comment that you have about remote testing, this email at the bottom of this slide is the way to get in touch with us about remote testing. Just a quick overview of the remote testing mobile phone pilot is that we started it in November of 2020. We've recruited 15 programs from around the country, and they have been actively trying out both the more than 5 students at a time, as well as the phones. We are continuing right now with this pilot. We are wanting to get more data, especially for math and listening, to make sure that we understand how it functions in relation to on-site testing and in other ways. And we've also, and we're going to report on this right now, we've been doing student surveys as part of this pilot, and Jared's going to tell you quite a bit about that in a minute. But if you are interested in participating in this pilot, whether for more than 5 or for the phone pilot especially, please contact us and let us know, and we'll get in touch with you and tell you the details of that. All right, without further ado, now I'm going to pass it over to Jared, and he's going to take you into the preliminary findings on remote testing research.
Thanks, Linda. So we will switch share screen here. Good morning, everyone. I think Daniel introduced me briefly. My name is Jared Jacobson, and I'm a senior research analyst at CASAS. I do a lot of work with the validation of our tests, all the research studies we do to validate our CASAS tests and to test them, make sure they're working properly. And we, as Linda mentioned, we've been doing this remote research study that, you know, as we all know, remote testing came to the forefront and became very critical. So there was a lot of work that needed to be done, starting from kind of the beginning and ramping up very quickly. So part of this, we wanted to get student perceptions on how they perceived the remote testing process, how they perceived the remote testing experience. And we will get into that. First, I wanted to share the results of our poll we just did. And just kind of look at our attendees real quick and their experience with remote testing. So question 1 in the poll was, what is your experience with remote testing? So we can see that 65% of you have proctored a remote test. 30% have helped to implement a remote testing program, and 40% participated in the student intake process for remote testing. And 1 has taken a remote test. So good, we have good representation. Question 2, how much remote testing has your agency done since March 2020? Let's see. Most or all test takers have taken remote tests. We have 50%. Some test takers have taken remote tests, about 25%. Few test takers have taken remote tests, 10%, and no test takers have taken remote tests. Just 1 respondent, or 5%, said that no test takers have taken remote tests at their agency. So great, that's good input, thank you. And lastly, our third question, how much remote testing is your agency currently doing? We wanted to see if you're ramping down a little in remote testing, staying steady. And this, we can see here, 3 respondents, 15%, said we are increasing our volume of remote testing, maintaining a similar volume, about 40% exactly. We're decreasing our volume of remote testing, about 30%, and currently doing no remote testing, 5%, or 1 out of the 20 respondents. Great. Thanks so much for participating and giving us an initial idea of your background. So let's get into discussing the results of our I want to say preliminary results, because this is ongoing, and we're just really getting into seeing what students' perceptions are and what results we're seeing from remote testing, since it is a very new process, over the last year to year and several months. First of all, I'd like to start off just by showing a little graph here that kind of illustrates the trends of remote testing over the past, well, let's say here we're looking at the last program year, 2020-2021, which was the first full program year that's really been impacted in adult education by this remote testing. And you can see that remote testing kind of ramped up here, and then it kind of leveled off, and then we saw some more ramping up into December, January, February, beginning of this year. And it looks like it's just starting to decrease a little over the last couple months. And you can compare that to on-site testing, which at the beginning started quite low. Part of this is seasonal, but there's also other impacts over this year in terms of school closures and openings and changing guidelines. So we saw that this trends that some up and down, but that just gives you an idea of the comparison between on-site and remote testing with CASAS tests. So as Linda mentioned, I believe we are doing we are currently doing trying to find out more about student perceptions of remote testing. So we've done a survey to date. 246 students have responded from 15 adult education. Let me pull this over. From a total of 15 adult education providers. And the remote testing is ongoing. So we're continuing to get respondents. We've had good response so far with 246 students. We would like to get more response across different states and agencies. So this survey will continue to be implemented. Sorry. Test location. So first of all, this is where the students reported that they took their remote test. We can see that the vast majority, 203, took the test at home. And we also have 35 students who took the test While remotely, they still took it at a location that was not their home, a library or school they cited, and we had one student that took it at work. Then we asked the students, did you like taking a test at home? And a total of 186, kind of pretty remarkably on this question, said they did like taking a test at home. And only one said no. 16 said, I don't know. We include this I don't know question. It can kind of be interpreted as a student who doesn't want to respond to a yes or a no. They may be in between. They may have been kind of lukewarm on the experience. So they have this option to select I don't know. But overall, pretty remarkable in our result that 186 yeses on taking a test at home and only one no at this point in these, as I said, preliminary results. Then we asked students, do you think you would get a higher score if you took the test at a different place? So a total of the vast majority said that no, they wouldn't. Only 26 students said that they felt they would get a higher score if they took the test at a different place, which, as we saw in our survey, mainly was at home. So there was a small proportion of students that said they would, and 64 said, I don't know. They really didn't have an opinion or a clear opinion as to whether they would score higher or not at home. Do you like taking a test on your device? So we can see here that the students in the survey were very comfortable taking the test at home, and they appeared to be very comfortable taking the test on the device that they used for that remote test. And in this case, we can see for desktop, laptop, iPad, tablet, or Chromebook, very few students reported they did not like the device that they took the test on. So perhaps we can interpret this data at this point as, well, the student is at their location, they're using their device that they're most comfortable with, that they use most of the time, and the results seem to indicate that they were quite comfortable using that device. And I think Linda mentioned, and Daniel, any questions you have throughout this, feel free to put them in the chat, and then we'll open up also at the end of this section for any voice questions if you'd like to ask. So we also gave students an opportunity in the survey to give their opinions on, to give their comments about remote testing. And the student comments on taking a test at home, there were quite a few of them. Most respondents did take time to write a comment about how comfortable they were with it and what their comments were on taking a test at home. These few comments here I think I tried to summarize the most common comments and kind of the feel that I was getting as I looked at and went over all these survey results. And these are actual quotes from the students. I like it in my home doing my tests since I feel comfortable with my space. There were a lot of comments about the students feeling comfortable with where they were taking their test at home. I think in my home I could focus more. Once again, same theme. There were a lot of comments about them being comfortable with that environment. The result will depend on how much I understand about the subject, not where I take my test. There were quite a few comments about students being very practical, I would say, in this, and very, well, taking having the opinion that I'm going to, it doesn't depend where I take it. I will be able to perform, I should be able to perform based on how much I understand about the subject, not the location where I'm at. Now, we know that I think that obviously there can be some issues on test performance based on where a test is taken, based on distractions, and based on not having consistency in the testing environment. So while we know that happens, the fact that students feel that, I think it's good to go into the test, with this attitude that I am going to do on this test how I, based on how much I know and how much I'm able to demonstrate as opposed to my environment, although we know that environment can definitely have impact on performance. And lastly, my home has many distractions. So while the majority were comfortable with their environment, there were comments about a home having distractions. And that's, we can definitely see on while the home environment may be very good for testing for the majority, or even a very significant majority, some home environments would have distractions, definitely. And so that comment did come up a few times and is important to take into account. Student comments on the device used to take the test. So here's a few of the comments that they responded regarding the device they used in their remote testing. The internet was slow sometimes, so that came up, and that can be a source of inconsistency in the testing experience. I prefer laptop because I know the functions 100%. So once again, students seem to, when they are on a device that they're familiar with and most comfortable with, that came up a lot. So when they're on their own laptop taking the test, that they know that laptop and they feel comfortable, or whatever that device may be. I don't like about taking a test on this device, iPad, tablet, because it doesn't have a keyboard. So this came up as well. Different devices such as a keyboard, and later we'll talk about our mobile phone pilot study, which would not have a keyboard. Those kind of things can be an issue for some examinees. I think that's pretty clear, and that did come up in their comments. Well, this is my first time testing on an iPad. I'm still learning. Oops. And I liked it. So that came up, and I think that's important because students did mention that they were open to new devices, and they were open to, and sometimes it took a little bit of ramping up, so to speak, but there were several comments about that they liked taking it for the first time on this device that they hadn't used before. All right, this backward. Okay, continuing. Oops. Yes, sorry. So we also wanted to look a little bit at our performance, and meaning how students performed on remote testing in actual scores, and comparing that to in-person testing. One way that we wanted to look at this, or a main way that CASAS tests are used that many of you will be familiar with, is the NRS level that they test into based on their score. So just briefly, the NRS level there's performance categories, 6 performance categories. A CASAS score will place them into a specific performance category or NRS level, and that is used. From there, you can make interpretations on the score where the student is functioning, and also measure gain as they take post-tests and move up into higher NRS levels. So what we wanted to look at was just, and like Linda mentioned, and I believe I mentioned, these are preliminary numbers, and it's really preliminary remote testing across the industry because it's so new for a lot of testing organizations and test and those that deliver tests and education. So we did want to look at a snapshot right now as to how the NRS distribution compared among the remote testers and the in-person testers, and see what we saw. So you can see here from from these charts, and we're looking at a lower level reading form, CASAS reading form, and a higher level CASAS reading form, that the remote testing for the remote distribution on the lower level form looks pretty similar to the in-person. We can see here that, you know, a slightly higher percentage tested into NRS level 3 on remote actually compared to in-person, and a slightly lower tested into level 1, very similar at level 2. So in general, we're just looking at this result and seeing that we're not seeing any major changes in the overall distribution of examinee scores based on these two different methods of delivery, remote versus in person. And we can also see that on the higher level reading forms, that very similar as well. This particular form was tested examinees into NRS level 4, 5, and 6, and we can see the distribution is very similar across the three. We also looked at math, and we can see performance here is very similar as well. Some differences, you know, for example, on level 4, we see remote, there was a higher percentage that tested into level 4 on this low level math form compared to in person. And looking at higher level math forms, the distribution also looks here very similar. So, you know, what we interpret this as initially is that we don't see any red flags in terms of how students are performing on remote compared to in person. We're seeing a similar distribution into their where they score here, measured by their classification into NRS levels.
Jared, just before,
yes,
there is a question in the chat asking just about the in-person scores and those remote test scores, if they were from the same time period.
Yes. So yes, those were from the same time period, the 2021 program year. Yeah, so we took the exact same time period and looked at and compared, and first took the means, placed them all into NRS levels, and looked at that distribution. So yes, thanks for that question. Okay, so we wanted to, I think, take just a moment here to take a breather after all that data I went through, and see if anyone has any additional questions on the research that we've done to date. And later, Linda said, as Linda mentioned, I believe we're going to do a little, we're going to do, well, a little bit of kind of collaborative research in this session, and that we're going to get some of your feedback on your experiences. And I think that's really important because everyone is working on, you know, everyone's doing research themselves here on remote testing, since it's new to us all. We're all seeing how it's functioning for us as educators and for our students. So I would open it up to any questions or comments at this stage.
Jared, there is a question about the demographics and gender and age of the students.
Yes, so we haven't done a full demographic study, so to speak, because these results are so initial. So the data for the student performance is based on all tests that are taken. So that is very representative because it's including everyone. So those that were tested. Now, your question may be speaking to, are we seeing different demographics that are taking remote versus that took on site? That's a great question. And that's something we need to research for sure, because there may be some differences in our, you know, what our what our overall population is, and then the population that actually decides to take an online or a remote test or an online proctored test compared to those that take on site. So my response to that is we have not done a lot of demographics, but that is on our list to do demographic analysis in terms of looking at, are there any differences in different population groups? And that's very important. And that's an important, very important question. Thank you. But the data that we used for that study, for the overall study on the performance, included all examinees that took the test. Now, we also need to do the demographic studies as we get a higher end for the student surveys as well. So far, the survey has been limited to those that we could get on board initially to distribute the survey. Our next step is to make sure all of our demographic groups are represented in the survey, and that we have representation both in terms of location across the country, and also the different demographic subgroups, and making sure we cover all demographic characteristics. Any other questions at this point? We good, Daniel? Am I good to move on?
Jared, yeah, I think we can carry on.
All right, sounds good. So, doing good on, okay. So Linda mentioned kind of a subset of our remote testing research is our pilot study that we've done on mobile devices, mobile phones. So in 2021, we began conducting a pilot study using mobile devices to deliver tests. And we're administering a student survey to try to, much like our remote testing survey that we discussed, to understand students' experiences using a mobile device. To date, 206 students have responded from 15 adult education providers. So we do definitely want to boost that to make sure that we're covering all students' demographics. We have several action items on this survey to follow up individually with a certain subset of students to get more in-depth feedback on their experience testing on phones, because this pilot study, not only is remote testing brand new, as we know, to these students, but testing on an actual mobile device is another step that is, well, brand new as well. So we want to take time to actually do case studies on individual students to get more in-depth information about their experience, and do that with educators that are participating in the pilot to get their feedback as well. So this is pretty interesting. Did you like taking a test on your mobile device? And it's almost 50-50 in the survey so far. So we can see yeses lost to no's by just 1 point. So it's 91 no's, 90 yeses, and 24 I don't know. So this is pretty interesting because you can kind of look at it like it depends on your perspective in some ways. Like, this is a brand new process, taking a test on your mobile device remotely, and about half of the respondents said they liked it. They liked taking the test on their mobile device. That could be seen as a positive. However, 91 said they did not. So that definitely could be seen as a negative. What you might initially take away from this is it's very mixed, and taking a test on a mobile device is not for everyone. Like I said, initial results, but that's what we see so far. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting also is that when we look at that same question, did you like taking a test on your mobile device by agency? Here we can see the totals. As I mentioned, it was 90 yeses, 91 nos. But here's a few of the agencies with the most student respondents, and we can see some pretty big differences, meaning in this particular agency, many more students said they did not like taking the test on a mobile device, whereas on agency number 1 or agency number 5 or 6, the majority said that they did like taking the test on their mobile device. So the reason for this could be, just a different student population taking the tests at those agencies. There could be some differences in how the tests were administered by those particular agencies, or something there. And like I said, that is on our next list to follow up with educators and students to get more insight into some of this data here. But initially it looks like, well, it's an even 50-50 on the yes and no's. There are some differences among agencies, and we want to see in the future why that might be. Oops, here we go. Students who reported they liked taking a test on their phone. Was it difficult to see all the words on the test? So what we wanted to look at here was those that reported that they liked taking the test on their phone. Did we see how did they, in terms of some of the technical aspects of that, what did they report there? So those that reported they liked taking a test on the phone, almost 90% said that there was no difficulty seeing the words on the test. And a small proportion 10% said there was. So all in all, those that did not have difficulty seeing the words, those that reported liking the test on their phone, as we would expect, did not have difficulty seeing the words on the test. Was it easy to make the words bigger or smaller on the test? Once again, we would hypothesize that those that like the experience of taking the test on their phone would say that, yes, it's easy to make the words bigger or smaller as needed. And sure enough, they did. 81% said that it was easy. However, there were a small minority, so to speak, percentage that did say that it was not easy for them to make the words bigger or smaller on their mobile device. Students who reported that they did not like taking the test on their phone. Was it difficult to see all the words on the test? So here we're looking at that same data, but for that group that said they did not like taking the test on their phone. Was it difficult to see all the words on the test? 59% said yes, it was difficult. So it's much different response compared to those that said they liked the experience. However, still 39% said that did not like it, said that it was, was it difficult to see all the words on the test? 39% said no, it was not difficult. However, they still did not like taking the test on their phone. And was it easy to make the words bigger or smaller on the test? 58% only said yes, it was easy. 25% no, 17% I don't know. So it wasn't, so we can see definitely some difference here, and it definitely is a factor so in what we see in these preliminary results, that those that did not like taking a test on their phone were more likely to say they had difficulty seeing the words on the test or making the words or the text, the items bigger or smaller. And just to look at a little bit of the qualitative data from these surveys, what do you like about taking the test on your phone? These are some of the trends that we saw, the answers we saw most common when students were asked this question. You can take the test wherever you want. That's obviously when this pilot was started, that was one of our big reasons for starting this pilot, was with the idea of increasing access to students, since the proportion of students, we hypothesized that had access to a phone that had the capability to take a remote test was higher, and would increase access to tests. And sure enough, you can take the test wherever you want, was their first comment, which, obviously there are standards as to, where they take the test remotely and the testing environment. But I think they're referring to that you really can make a lot of different places work and meet those requirements when all you have to do is have your phone with you. I don't have a laptop or desktop at the moment, and this was one of the things we were trying to get at by increasing access through using mobile phones. Those examinees, those students who don't have access to another device, a laptop or desktop, would still be able to take a test. And we did see quite a few comments in that area. For myself, the test was easy to do on the phone, because nowadays we practically do everything in the phone. A lot of students did express they're very comfortable with their phone. That's the device they're using all day. It's the device they always have with them. It's what they use the most. So they are very comfortable with that. Being comfortable with that device, we would hypothesize, translates to a good test experience, potentially, because they're so familiar with doing things on that phone. And lastly, it can be very close to my eyes. I can hold it in my hand. That comes down to mobility. They can, obviously a phone has has a small screen, and that's the biggest issue. They can hold it in their hand. They can make it very mobile, bring it closer to their eyes. So there were several comments about that type of mobility with the phone. What did you not like about taking a test on your phone? Well, the letter was too small for me to read. This is what we would expect. I mean, the biggest issue is basically comes down to size of screen and size of the content. So that came up quite often in the comments. It was difficult to select answers, and moving on to the next question was especially difficult due to the small icons for everything. So this comes down to screen size, and also there were some issues about moving on to the next question about navigating the screen. So that came up quite often as well, relatively often as a comment. Not having the use of keyboard and mouse. So being used to taking a test on a desktop or laptop, using your keyboard and mouse a lot, moving to a phone, obviously that can be an issue and can make someone uncomfortable in navigating the test. That came up, and it's a bit annoying having to zoom in and out to read everything. So yeah, that's a different, because that's a different kind of action that a test taker has to do that they don't have to do on a laptop and desktop, in terms of scrolling, in terms of zooming in and out. Potentially can create a problem with construct validity, really, because they're doing actions that may take them extra time, may confuse them, and may cause issues with their performance ultimately. Okay, just real quick. Am I doing okay on time, Daniel? Sorry, I lost track. Let me know if not.
Yeah, you're doing okay, Jared.
Just doing pretty good. Okay, good. So we also hypothesized, or something we wanted to look at, was for the pilot study with mobile devices, does it take longer to take a test on a mobile device because of some of these different different processes that need to happen when taking a test on a mobile phone? We did not see significant differences in test taking time. You can see here on a reading goals form that we analyzed, the mean test taking time computer here in the blue versus mobile phone. Mobile phone was actually a little less across the entire population. And then we also looked at the 25th percentile, meaning those that finished the 25% of examinees that finished first. What did that look like? They also, we also saw a little bit higher time for computer compared to mobile, and same at the 90th percentile, where at the, how long did it take those at the very 90th highest amount of test taking time. We saw very similar, but actually, once again, just slightly less time to take the test on a mobile device. And when we look at a math goals form, we see pretty similar results. Both the mean, and I'll just kind of point out the mean here for a math goals form was actually higher on the computer, mean test taking time compared to a mobile phone. The NRS level distribution, looking at performance once again, like we did with the remote testing study, except here for the mobile devices. Once again, this, like I've mentioned several times, this is preliminary. We don't want to take any final conclusions from this. I mean, it's a very, these studies are new. There's still a lot of work to be done, but we don't see any major red flags in terms of performance on the computer compared to mobile phone when we look at this overall NRS distribution, or the distribution of examinees categorized into NRS levels. We looked at this lower level reading form that measured NRS levels 1, 2, and 3. And we can see here, we look at the blue shows their being categorized into 1, 2, and 3 on the computer, and the red on mobile device. You can see there were, on this form in particular, a few more, a little bit higher percentage test into of examinees tested into NRS level 3, and a little higher on computer, sorry, and a little bit lower tested into level 2 on computer compared to mobile phone, very similar at level 1. As we move over here to a higher level reading form, and it's, coming back to kind of looking at all this data by different groups, like by demographics, which we plan to, need to do more of. We also want to look at the different spectrum of examinees levels. We want to make sure, that a mobile device is practical for a lower level student compared to a higher level, or do we see any trends there? Do we, in terms of delivering a test based on an examinee's ability at that time? So we looked at higher level reading form as well, and you can see the distribution fairly similar, once again, based on this form that tests into NRS levels 4, 5, and 6. Computer and mobile phone, we see just a little bit a higher examinee proportion into level 6 on computer compared to mobile phone. So the last thing I wanted to mention in this portion of the presentation was how important it is for us, to continue to, as a major part of our research with remote testing and with our pilot, to look at the industry research that's out there. There's been so much remote testing that's happened in this past year that there is a lot of, and usually it is preliminary research, and most data I've looked at is very, it's very preliminary, and researchers do have that caveat that we're still analyzing this because it's new. So I wanted to mention a few things I came across recently in our industry research that we've done. So this first quote, or first piece of information, is from Paula Lehane from Dublin City University, and this was at the NCME conference. Bring your own device is gaining traction. Overall, among devices, you can see similar performance, but on an individual basis, see differences. Screen size is the biggest factor due to text size, resolution, and the amount of content on the screen, and therefore the amount of scrolling needed. And one thing I recall from her presentation is that you can look at this aggregate data on something like, and in this case, she was talking about testing on a mobile device. And you can see very similar performance results across an entire group, but on an individual basis, see differences. And that speaks to the effect that it may not be for everyone. So as a whole, we may see very similar breakdowns in performance in the entire population, but there are individuals that it just will not work for due to screen size, due to different factors, and that needs to be taken into consideration when we consider giving more flexibility as to what device they use and not requiring or one specific device in that case. And that's what I took away from her research and her presentation. Scrolling, she mentioned, was a big scrolling was could be a big factor in terms of, and could have an effect on performance. The more scrolling you do, the more kind of memory function, that is a different type of memory function is involved. And so they often look at the amount of scrolling that happens and how that may affect performance. Sorry, I missed one here. Overall, we saw a very positive experience with remote proctoring. 32% were very satisfied versus 11% were dissatisfied. 79% score was not negatively affected by the proctoring environment, and 44% remote testing caused increased anxiety. This is from the National League for Nursing at the ATP conference. So they at a point moved to remote testing, and they did a study much like the study we're conducting, where they wanted to see students' perceptions. Overall, the tone from their presentation was they saw it as a very positive experience, but not without some that were not satisfied with the experience. You can see 32% were satisfied with remote proctoring, 11% were very satisfied, 11% were very dissatisfied. 79% said they did not feel their score was negatively affected by the proctoring environment, and 44% did say that they felt some increased anxiety from remote testing. So just a couple more research, a little research that we've done, and I'd like to mention in closing. One can be from Stephen Wise at the assessment in the time of COVID-19, also from the National Conference on Educational Measurement. One can be confident that the map growth testing in remote testing should not meaningfully increase disengagement. So they came to the conclusion that, and one thing they wanted to look at is, will being remote in this different environment, oftentimes in one's home, cause disengagement from the test? They did not find that it caused meaningful disengagement. Also from the NCME conference, I bring up this quote because it seemed to come up in most presentations. We need more research and advances in virtual learning, instruction, and assessment. So we have what we see so far, we have these findings to date. A lot more research into the how well virtual learning, instruction, and assessment is working needs to be done. And while he said that in his conference, this seems to come up in almost every presentation I've seen and paper I have read. Lastly, from our own CASAS Summer Institute, a presentation I went to yesterday, which was great, from the online proctor GED test. Just a couple of things they mentioned. Approximately 3 in 4 test takers would choose online proctoring versus in-person moving forward. So that shows that in their experience that test takers would continue to use online proctoring in the future. 84% of test takers would recommend online proctoring to a friend. So they liked it enough that if someone asked them, how would you like to take, or how do you recommend I take my GE test, they would recommend online proctoring. And that was from the presentation yesterday at the Summer Institute. Okay, well, that is all I have regarding our preliminary results from our remote proctored testing research studies and our mobile device pilot. I open it up for any questions before we move into some discussion as a group, or a little bit of research as a group. Questions or comments before we?
I think people have been asking them as we go in the chat box, so maybe we can carry on.
Sure. Okay.
So, yeah, so now in the next part of our session, we're going to ask you to complete some surveys. And the first one, Jared, do you want to go to the next slide, or I can? Whichever.
Yeah, let me turn the screen back over to you, Linda.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. Sorry. All right. Sorry. I'm in the wrong place here. So actually, the first thing is we're going to ask you to do a short survey individually. And in that, it's a Likert scale. So we're asking you to rate your responses on a Likert scale. So I'm going to ask Daniel to please put that link in the chat for you. It's already there. And please go ahead and take that survey. We don't think it'll take you too long, just maybe 3 or 4 minutes. And then when you're done, if you could let us know in the chat.
Yeah, Linda and everyone, I was just going to mention, like, as I said, and when I was speaking, you know, we have more research planned for looking at case studies from educators and individual students. So this is kind of a step here in where we get to do some research here during our presentation and learn from each other. And yeah, like Linda said, this first question is for us to give some feedback on, you know, different parts of remote testing, and do a little research and analysis right here on the fly. Maybe just another minute here. We still have responses coming in, Linda.
Yeah. There are 51 people here in the meeting. So please,
Right.
we really would appreciate it if you can take the survey. It really will help us in our research.
Yeah, thanks everyone. We're getting a really good response rate here. And
if you missed the link the first time, Daniel's put it back in. How are we doing, Jared?
Oh, Linda, yeah, I think we're doing great. Responses are pretty much in here. I think we've slowed down. So yeah, I think we can continue on.
All right, well, actually, you may think we're going to give you the responses right away, but unfortunately with SurveyMonkey, Jared has to do some magic in the back end to compile those. So while he does that, we're going to ask you to take another survey. And that's, Danny's going to put that link in the chat box now. So this one is has open-ended questions. Looks like this. So if you wouldn't mind carrying on with telling us what you think. Take your time.
Yeah, the group survey is, as Linda's has up on the screen now and that everyone I think is working on. Just take a few minutes to kind of maybe if you could to just brainstorm a short answer about your experience in as many of these questions that you can respond to from your experience. And we'll then go over them as a whole group and see how many shared in different responses we have and experience we have with remote testing. So it should be quite interesting.
So Jared, how are we doing with the responses? Maybe another minute or so?
Yeah,
Finished a while ago.
let's give it about a minute or two more here.
How many responses do you have, Jared?
Let's see, I think let me double check on our last survey, the group survey. We have 20, so I think we're pretty good. I think we can move in to discussion, Linda. And
Okay, so maybe you want to put up the results to the first survey, well, the Likert scale one?
yes.
I want to say we really appreciate that you're taking time to put your opinions down for us, and we really wanted to take advantage of you as field practitioners, a very important part of the process for remote testing, and we really want to know your viewpoints about it at this stage where we've all been through about a year of this, and what are you feeling now, and where do you think it's going? So
Yeah,
Jared,
Linda, I mean, let me lead us into this and
Yeah, go ahead,
we can
please.
discuss. Yeah. So here are the results from the individual Likert scale type questions that you answered. And like Linda said, thanks so much for participating in our research study. So the first question was, the remote testing is comparable to the experience of in-person testing? And the Likert scale was on a 1 to 5 scale, starting with strongly disagree up to strongly agree. So the closer to 5, the weighted averages, the most the most strongly agree, or the most agree the respondents were to that question. So we can see from our first question that the majority said they agree that it is comparable to the experience of in-person testing. By majority, I mean the highest response was 40% said they agree. However, about 22.5% said they disagree. So there was some difference in opinion on that. And the overall weighted average was 3.17 in terms of your feelings about, is remote testing comparable to in-person testing? Second question, should I just keep going, Linda? And please chime in any thoughts you have as well, and any questions anyone has. Remote testing has received a positive response from students. 55% said they agree, and another 30% said they strongly agree. Only one respondent said they disagree. So overall, it seems quite positive response from students, and a weighted average of 4.15. Third question, remote testing offered on phones would increase student access to testing. 45% said agree, and another 42.5% strongly agree. So once again, I think we have a lot of agreement that offering remote testing on phones will increase student access. Weighted average 4.28. Remote testing will continue to be offered by my agency in 2021, either exclusively or in addition to in-person testing. So the vast majority agree and strongly agree with that as well, with just one responder disagreeing, weighted average of 4.31. So it looks like, based on our research here, that remote testing will continue to be offered in 2021. Remote testing will continue to be offered by my agency in the long term, either exclusively or in addition to in-person testing. Most also feel that to be the case as well. 47% agree, 47.5, 27.5 strongly agree, for a weighted average of 4.11. So the biggest difference, I think, here in agreement among everyone on this call, the educators and participants, is whether the comparability of the experience to in-person testing. Okay.
Hey, thank you for that. And now, do you need a minute to compile the other?
Yeah, I do. I just need a
Okay,
minute, and we're going to go over those questions that you just, not even a minute, but it'll be
That's
just
fine.
a second here.
Well, in the meantime, I would like to ask everyone if you had any reactions. Were you surprised by the preliminary results that we presented today? Does anyone, and you can unmute yourself if you'd like to answer about that. I know some of you came to the session wondering about what we had found. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, Miss. It was a lot of feedback. I'm sorry. If you want to type something, please do that. Would anyone else like to give their views on this? You may have come wondering whether in terms of the quantifiable data, what we had found so far in terms of the comparability of student performance, were you surprised by those results so far or not? Also, the student perceptions, where we showed you whether students like to take the test on the phone. Any surprises there? Things that you weren't expecting? I'll just go back to some of these findings. Like this one. Was this surprising?
And we can't see your screen if you're sharing.
Oh dear. All right. Let me see if I can fix that. There we go. This pie chart, where we found that pretty much it breaks down 50-50 students who said they liked and didn't like taking the test on a mobile phone. Any thoughts about that? Okay. And how about the performance results? Is that reassuring? I know in terms of the Likert scale responses, that's the one thing that people were most unsure about. So far, and of course we are collecting more data on the both the remote testing in-person versus in-person and the phone testing versus other testing. We are continuing to collect more data so that we can make sure we have all the demographics covered, including Maria was mentioning earlier, especially age, which can certainly be a factor about in terms of comfort on mobile devices. And one of the things I think that we did reflect in the questions we asked you, and it's about the comfort that students have on their mobile device, which we think, and one of our colleagues in the field has advised us that this is really a key consideration that we agree is probably the biggest factor in terms of how students will perform on the mobile device and how comfortable they'll be, how comfortable they'll be. So Christina's asking, I wondered on the phone testing, how many were pre-test versus post-test? Yeah. I would imagine that the pre-test students would not know enough to know the difference. Maybe, yeah. So if they were new to taking the CASAS test overall, they wouldn't be able to compare. They might have taken the test elsewhere. But. Okay, Yadamir Mendoza writes, I was surprised that so many students like taking a test on their mobile device because of the fact that their mobile device has a smaller screen, make it harder to navigate. Me too. I was surprised. I actually, though, think that, there are a lot of people, a lot of students who, their phone is an extension of their hand practically, and they are very comfortable navigating anything on it. So, it's hard for some of us to relate to, but some of them have actually said that they found it easier to test on a mobile phone than on a device like a laptop or an iPad that they weren't so familiar with. So I agree, it's a bit surprising. And, you might think at first blush that, reading goals, higher level with those longer passages, I mean, they're not super long, but long enough that would be a barrier, but a lot of them specifically said no when we asked. Yes, someone is saying, be interested in seeing how students break down by age and also ABE versus ESL. Yes, and that's when we get a little more data, we'll be able to do those analyses and have a little more confidence that we have more students responding to be able to see that more clearly. And we're also, as Jared mentioned earlier, we're planning to do some, we're just on the verge actually of doing some case studies where we have students who took these surveys in terms of the phone testing, and we're going to arrange a phone call with them through their agency and explore a little bit more about how they felt about taking the test on a phone. And we're going to try to interview some who liked it and some who didn't, and see if we can get a little more insight into their experience.
Linda, I think we have about 5 minutes in the presentation.
Yeah.
So let's quickly go through the group responses here, and we'll just kind of share them with everyone so we can all benefit from this research we've done today.
Go ahead.
And okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so here's everyone's responses to how do you feel about students testing with the delivery method they're most comfortable with, giving them the choice, or giving the option and the kind of the theory or hypothesis that students will do best on the device they're most comfortable with. So we can see a lot of good responses here. Many students prefer remote testing. They're comfortable with being in their own space due to COVID concerns. If they're allowed with any method, it will help them feel less stress. I think it's great, provides access for all of our students. I think that students who are in ESL, especially the lower levels, will benefit either from an orientation class or taking the test in person. Thank you for that comment. I enjoy in-person remote testing equally. Good. Majority prefer remote testing. I think it's an excellent idea. I would prefer to continue remote testing and offer only in person as necessary, but agency wants to do the opposite. I feel like students would get good scores if they're comfortable with either remote testing or in-person testing. So most seem positive to that option. Positive, totally feel it's a good thing. I think it's a great tool to be able to offer students. Great. And we'll look at these in more detail, all your comments, but thanks so much. Let me bring up our second question.
Oh, you're
How do you
going.
feel about,
Sorry, Jared, I just want to say that we had originally thought we would put you in breakout rooms and have you come up with group responses, but I'm actually have to say I'm really glad that we got the rich responses from all of you. And we're not going to be able to get through all of them. We'll get through as many as we can in the time we have left, but we will compile these, and then we have our next National CASAS update webinar on August 18th. And at that webinar, we should be able to share with you the compiled summary of the responses that we got from these surveys. So I just wanted to mention that, there's a lot of richness here and it's wonderful. So let's see how far we can get through it, but we won't get all the way. Go ahead.
what are some of the benefits of remote testing compared to in-person testing? Wow, a lot of good feedback here. This is great. I look forward to going over this with more time, as Linda said. Students are able to be in the comfort of their own homes. Some may not have childcare as many of their children are home. Oh, yes, that is definitely a consideration. Students who work late can't make it on time to class. They can just go home, relax and do their assessment. Yes, convenience. Benefits of remote testing are that they can test from home, less anxiety. Transportation. You get more one-on-one with students. You're able to capture those students who could not go in person. More relaxed environment, convenience in terms of travel. Quicker results, lessens anxiety. Remote locations. Learning technology, different technologies they test. Great. So let's just quickly, drawbacks to remote testing. Not everyone has the technology at home. Internet problems, yes. Lack of knowledge of technology. Backlash with all the distractions. Set up on Apple computers and Chromebooks as mentioned. Testing larger groups as mentioned, multiple students when you're in person.
Jared, we have come to the end of our time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And we got through question number 4. We had 3 more questions. Yeah, thanks so much. We have great answers here. And like Linda said, she will share those. So Linda, I'll let you say any parting words. And I would just like to thank everyone, all the attendees, and thanks so much for participating as well in our research today.
Thanks, Jared. Can you just go to the very last question? Maybe we can just have that on the screen at the very end, and people can see about the future. And we're really curious to be able to study these and pull them together and share them. So thank you all so much for attending. We hope it was enlightening, and we thank you very much for your input as well. We really value that greatly, and hope you have a great rest of the Institute. Thank you for coming.